Welcome to Teachers in One Word, where we pay tribute to our faculty, staff, and the cult of pedagogy. In this episode, we will be interviewing Dr. Fernando Román of the Secondary Division. He is currently a mathematics and physics professor here at St. John's School. So, Fernando, so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Very honored to be here. Happy to share a little bit of me with the our community.
You relatively started last year, right? You've only been here. This is your second year.
Yeah. Correct.
So we're going to find out all about you. I'd like to start a little bit by probing into your past and the things that led you to becoming a teacher. So let's go back to the foundational background. Tell us about your hometown, perhaps, your family, your schooling, the things that you remember that most interested you when you were young and that you discovered early on. That's a lot, I know, but you know, it's just to get you talking.
So I grew up in between Bayamón and Toalta here in Puerto Rico. I was born across the street. It's kind of interesting. I ended up coming back to where I was born. I was born at the Ashford. The Ashford
community
hospital. But you know, my parents lived in Toalta, right in the borderline with Bayamón. That's where I grew up. I grew up in a community urbanization that wasn't gated. It was sort of working class people. Had a bunch of friends there, and I went to school at Colegio La Salle, so in Bayamón. My dad was a teacher. My dad was a humanities teacher. He taught ethical studies, sociology, and psychology. He was also a history teacher, so he would change his assignment every now and then. And so one of the benefits as teachers got in that school was that their sons and daughters, their kids, were able to enroll in the school at free or reduced cost. So both me and my sister went to La Salle.
So La Salle is a private school?
It's a private Catholic school.
Okay.
From first grade. Well, now it has kindergarten. When I went there, it started in first grade. And I was there for 12 years, first grade all the way through senior year. I graduated from that school. And I'll come back to that because that's when I started to discover my passion for math. I graduated from there, and I went to the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras to study pure mathematics. I studied at the UPR for 3 semesters. Right in that around that third semester, I started to receive offers for athletic scholarship from some schools in the U.S. So I ended up transferring to Kansas State University. So Manhattan, Kansas, the little apple, as they affectionately call it. I tell people I'm going to school in Manhattan and immediately think New York. I'm like, no, not the big apple, the little apple. It's a small college town, very tight-knit community. The university is all there is in Manhattan, Kansas. I mean, it's a...
And it's very Midwestern, too.
It's very Midwestern.
It has a different feel.
Right. And so people are passionate for the school there because it's basically the strong foundation of that community. And so I went there as a student athlete. People just love the athletes there because, again, it's a small town. There's not a lot to do. But anytime our sports teams would play, they would pack the stadiums. Like, you couldn't even get standing room there anymore, after the game started. So I went there as a student athlete. I finished my bachelor's degree at Kansas State. And
can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
What did you go as an athlete? What type of athlete?
So I'm a runner, or I should say I was a runner.
Right.
I try to be one now. I'm not as good as I used to be, right? But I went
track and field.
I went for track and field, specifically distance running. So I went both cross country and track and field. So cross country is a fall sport, track and field is a spring semester sport. So I received a scholarship for that sport and was had the privilege of studying abroad, or not really abroad, in the U.S., right, in the States. Once I finished, I actually finished in December, not in May, as usually, as is usual. So I took one extra semester to finish my bachelor's degree because of that transfer. I transferred there to start in January, to start in the spring semester. So I ended up finishing in December of 2014. And I was pretty sure, like I was decided, I'm going to go to grad school. I want to do a master's and PhD in pure mathematics. And most grad schools will not accept students in January. So I was applying, but to start in May, which left a whole semester in between. Came back to Puerto Rico, my parents' house. I taught for a year at a private school in Vega Alta. So I was there in Vega Alta, between Vega Alta and Vega Baja. It's like in the I think it was Vega Baja actually already, but somewhere in between the two towns. I taught there math to pretty much the entire school, like 5th grade through juniors.
Wow, what a challenge.
So that was my first experience in a classroom actually teaching, just one semester. Then in August I started grad school.
And did it stick with you at the time, or was it something that you needed to do, obviously, because you were in between?
Right, I was in between. I had a bachelor's degree in mathematics, and although that is marketable, typically the kinds of jobs that are searching for math graduates they're looking for permanent positions, right? And I was pretty clear that this is going to be a one semester thing. They needed a teacher. Their teacher had left in December. And so I was very clear. It's like, hey, I'm not going to be here in May. I just want to be clear about it. I'm leaving in August to go complete my degrees. And they were fine with it. We need to fill the semester and then somebody else can come. So looking back, it probably did influence my teaching style and everything I do. But at the moment, I was not at all yet thinking that I was going to be a teacher. That's not when that happened. I was pretty certain I'm going to get a PhD. I'm going to be a research mathematician. I'm going to be a professor at a university and do research in math. That was the goal.
I'm curious. I'm not a math person. When you say pure mathematics, can you explain that to me and the audience?
Yeah. So pure math basically means that we study abstract mathematics in some sense for the sake of mathematics, not because we're trying to solve a real world problem, but because we're trying to understand the patterns and the geometry, the things that we can discover purely in this abstract language of mathematics. A lot of mathematicians would say that pure mathematics is closer to language arts than it is to science. Math
beautiful.
is a language.
Wow.
Math is a language.
So poetic.
And so pure mathematics is more about discovering that knowledge. Now, oftentimes, more often than not, that knowledge does lead to real world discoveries. Oftentimes, math precedes physics and engineering. So you develop a theory in mathematics, then a couple years later, there's some development in physics, and suddenly they realize, oh, wait, what this person was doing 100 years ago in pure mathematics actually has applications to this. There's this entire area of mathematics called discrete mathematics, combinatorics, which didn't have many applications beyond just games, like throwing a die or flipping a coin, things like that, counting outcomes, things like that. As soon as computers were invented, that is the foundation. Without combinatorics, without discrete mathematics, there is no computer. There's no computer science. But of course, the people working on discrete math at the time, long centuries before computers even were an idea, didn't care about that. And so pure mathematics is about knowledge for the sake of knowledge rather than...
Or art for the sake of art.
Or art for the sake of art, correct.
So going back to the trajectory, because I interrupted you to ask you about pure math. So you were talking about how you then finished up your teaching interim, and then you went back to pursue your studies?
Yes, so a lot happened in that semester I was here in Puerto Rico. I did the teaching, but also I got married that summer.
Okay, here's where the running connection comes.
Yes, well, the running connection goes even further back. But yeah, that summer I got married, July 17th, remember it, of 2015.
You better, right?
No, sorry, it's not July 17, 2015. Yes, that's correct. That's when we got married. That was hard to think 9 years ago at this time, right? So it's been a while. And we moved together to Illinois. So I went to school at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. to pursue a PhD in pure mathematics, master's PhD, that career. So I started my degree, and for the first 2 years, you're taking core classes, your qualifier exams. Then you present what they call the preliminary exam, which is basically a research proposal. You're proposing, this is what I'm going to do for my thesis. And it has to be something novel. You're trying to discover new mathematics. That's how you get a PhD in pretty much any field. You're trying to contribute to the field. And at that point, that was 2.5 years into my PhD, I still was certain I'm going to be a professor. I'm going to be a research mathematician. But that's when things started to sort of take a bit of a turn. So when you're a grad student, you don't pay, at least in most areas of STEM, you don't really pay for your education. You work for the institution. So you work as a teacher assistant or as a research assistant. In the case of math, 99% of math graduates found their studies as a teaching assistant because mathematics in most universities is a service department. We service engineers. We service physics. All the physics students have to go and take their calculus classes or their linear algebra or their structures.
Right. So you basically support all of those foundational
Correct.
classes.
And so there's especially in the University of Illinois, which is a massive state school. I think it has something over 40,000 undergrads.
Wow.
Many students take math courses, and therefore they need the TAs. I mean, one professor cannot deal with 1,500 students taking a class.
Getting practice.
And so from the first year I got there, I was a TA. I started teaching undergraduate courses, so Calc 1, Calc 2, multivariate calculus, differential equations, these courses that are sort of your typical first 2 years of undergraduate math. And I started to enjoy it a little bit too much.
But tell me, that's the point where I'm interested. What was the spark that said, "Oh, I like this"?
I think it was a cumulative thing. I don't think there was any moment where I said, like, I want to be a teacher. I think it was a cumulative thing. I started teaching, I think, if I remember correctly, the first couple of years I was a TA for linear algebra. And so I had a group of about 30 students. I had 2 sections of 30 students. I met them twice a week each. And basically they've just come out of this 200 people lecture hall where the professor presents a PowerPoint, runs through it, and the dynamic of this type of class is nobody asks questions, right? There's 200 people in one lecture hall. And then they're in the smaller groups with the TA, that's when they are more open to really asking the questions, really are open to say, look, I don't understand. So I started, teaching not the actual class, but like more helping in the small groups. We would do the problem sets, I would explain. And oftentimes, people would come to me later when they saw me at the university or at the bike shop, because I was working as a bike mechanic at the time, and be like, hey, actually, I passed in your algebra thanks to you. Like, your explanations were really on point. They were really good. Like, I really like how you explain. You made the class make sense to me. And I think that started to accumulate. It's like, I actually enjoy it. And
so it was knowing that you were actually getting through to them, and that they were actually getting something from
right. Not just that I enjoy it, but that it seemed like I was at least decent at it, decent enough that some kids would identify with my teaching.
And making a difference.
Right. And, coming through math undergrad, master's, PhD, I had my fair share of terrible educators, like people who are very, very smart, especially at the university level. You encounter this situation where someone is amazing researcher in their field, but they're not necessarily good at communicating that research or bringing it down to the level of a student. Like, I'm not at that level yet. How can you explain this to me in my language? And so seeing that I was able to make that impact, to take this like complicated thing and sort of digest it and explain it in a way that was understandable, I sort of filled me a little bit. Like, I was...
Gave you a purpose.
Yeah, exactly. I enjoyed it. So... Next year, I asked to become a lead TA. So the lead TA takes a little bit more responsibility. You start to create content for the class together with the professor. So you create a little bit, the quizzes, the exams, the problem sets, and whatnot. I enjoyed it as well as like trying to come up with problems that would spark certain specific questions in students. to help them sort of discover things by themselves, and not so much like I'm telling you this, but the question comes out of you. And so I really enjoyed that process. So the year after that, my fourth year as a PhD student, I asked to become what in the University of Illinois, they call it teaching a standalone course. So basically means you become the instructor of record. So you are the teacher of that course. They will give you the course, you create the curriculum for the course, you create all the materials, you are the teacher. There's someone supervising. They visit you once or twice a semester, make sure, things are going smoothly. And that year I taught a geometry class for math teachers. So people who were studying to become math teachers. And I was teaching them geometry, but not just teaching them geometry, but teaching them how to teach geometry.
So that's when you're really getting into the pedagogy.
Correct. So I would have deep conversations with those students. They're studying to be educators. I'm not. I'm teaching them about the math.
Wow.
And in the cliche saying, I learn as much from my students as they learn from me. In that case, it was absolutely true. Like, I was not an educator. I never took education classes.
Right.
But in conversations with that, I was like, well, I really like this. It's interesting,
Yeah,
and it sort of sparks something.
I guess you kind of, at that level, when people are pursuing to continue their expertise at teaching, that they start sharing their own creative ways. Oh, I teach these equations in this way because my students seem to get it. That you have all that communal sharing of how to teach, right?
Correct. Nelson Frankie, our department chair in math, he always says that there's no copyrights in education.
Oh, awesome.
We just share techniques and we enrich each other. So
yes.
So it was a little bit of that, just sharing
Great.
that knowledge. And that's the point where I was like, during that semester, I realized I had my thesis work that I was trying to get done, to get done. And I had my standalone course that I was teaching. And I found that if I had 8 hours in a day, I would put 7 into preparing my classes, preparing activities, I just enjoyed it. How can I teach this concept in a way that's approachable, that anyone can understand it, and I come up with activities, active learning strategies, whatever. And then 1 hour before bedtime, I was like, wait, I was supposed to do some research work. This is falling behind, and it did fall behind. And so by the end of that year, I was like, do I really want to do research, or do I want to pursue education?
Wow.
And I sort of decided at the end of that year, what I want to do is I want to be an educator. I don't want to be a researcher. And that increased the conundrum for me. It made it really hard, because the thing is that if you are going to do education at a high level, so university, be an educator, so an instructor, there are not many opportunities for that in Puerto Rico. But to me, always coming back to Puerto Rico was a non-negotiable. I was going to come back to Puerto Rico as soon as I finished my PhD. I was going to bring back my knowledge, and I was going to contribute to my island.
Wow.
So it was hard, because I was like, I cannot go to Puerto Rico and be just an instructor. You have to complement with something, because for most schools here, if you're just an instructor, you get part-time positions. You get allocated
at the
a
university
class.
level.
At the university level. You get allocated.
What they call an adjunct.
Correct. You get allocated some classes. You teach them. They pay you by the class. You don't have guaranteed.
Unless you are like there forever and you have tenure, or.
But even then, in mathematics, for you to get tenure, at least in the UPR, you have to do research. You are a research professional. The UPR is
Which is what you were saying. That then the problem is that you could be a great researcher, but not necessarily a great professor.
Correct. The University of Puerto Rico is a research institution, research R1 institution is what's called, research-based. So their primary focus is the research. They are, I do believe they are an incredible educational institution. I admire the UPR, respect it. I will always defend it. But it was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to focus solely on teaching. I didn't really want to do research, or if I did it, it would have to be research with students, introduce students to research, rather than me trying to write proposals to get funding from the NSF. And, if I didn't, that would compromise my job. I didn't want to have that. I wanted my job to be based on my teaching. So So I had to make a decision, and the decision one, I want the stability of a full-time job with benefits and whatnot, but I want to be in Puerto Rico. So I went straight to high school. I moved to Puerto Rico after I finished my PhD. In fact, I moved to Puerto Rico before I finished my PhD.
Wow.
Because the pandemic hit. This was the 2020. And I was a TA at the time, but because everything went online, I was like, you know what, I'm going to take advantage, go to Puerto Rico, continue teaching online, and, and I'm already there. So I didn't get to enjoy my PhD graduation. It was canceled because COVID and whatnot. They had an online ceremony. I was already in Puerto Rico, defending my thesis through Zoom when nobody knew what Zoom was. At least I didn't.
Wow.
But everything worked out. So moved back to Puerto Rico. Immediately that August, I started what I would consider when I started becoming a full teacher. So I became a math teacher at Colegio San Ignacio. And I was there for 3 years. After that, I moved here. And now I'm sitting here in front of you.
Okay. Wow. What a beautiful journey. And I want to go back a little bit, maybe to some more personal aspects. Like, who were maybe the people that most influenced you? I mean, whether it was in mathematics or anything really that inspired you to kind of like follow your heart and do the things that you felt you wanted to do.
So there's contributions from many people. I mean, I have to name drop my parents. My family, I come from a family of teachers. My dad is a teacher. My mother-in-law, funnily enough, was also a teacher. She's retired now. She was a school principal. My wife is a teacher. She's a teacher here at St. John's School, actually, in the toddler program now. My cousins, one of my cousins are two of my cousins are PE teachers. One of the wife of my cousin, she's a Montessori guide teacher for little kids. So I come from a family of teachers, and so I sort of saw that. To me, I had many role models for what it is to be a teacher and a good teacher. But I would say that there's two people that probably at the time I didn't know it, but influenced my career. Two of them, one in mathematics and the other one in sports.
Wow, what a
So
great connection.
in the math branch, I had a teacher in Colegio La Salle. As I was, I think 10th grade was the first time I had him. His name Edmer Diaz. I still maintain contact with him, actually. He's a great math teacher. One of the best geometry teachers I've encountered in my entire life. He sort of noticed that I was good at it, that I enjoyed it. And he was the first person who told me, you can study math. At the time, I didn't know that you could just study math. I was thinking I'm going to be an engineer because I like math and engineering, whatever. He was the one that you could study just mathematics. If you like math, you can study math. I didn't even know that was an option. He was the first person to sort of tell me that. And I was like, that's interesting. Let me look into it. But more than that, he actually became like a mentor to me. We had to do the science fair. And he was like, hey, why don't you do a science fair in the category of mathematics? And I did my first ever math research project as a science fair, high school science fair, with Edmer as a mentor when I was in 10th grade. Me and a friend of mine who is now, funnily enough, an engineer, we got together and did a team project looking at some problems in geometry. And sort of that was what directed my life into mathematics, into I want to study pure math. This is fun. I want to do it, and I want to be able to do something useful with it. In the other side, in sports, the person that influenced me the most was my coach. He was my coach since I was in 8th grade, all the way through college. His name was Angel Perez. We called him Cowie. Everybody called him Cowie. That was his nickname. He sadly passed away a couple of years ago, lost battle to cancer, which was very sad news. I mean, it was hard to take. He was still relatively young. Incredible coach. He coached all kinds of athletes, Central American champions, Pan American champions, Olympians. Really, really renowned coach. And I started training with him in Bayamon Club, running club. And it was everyday thing. Track and field is one of those sports that you have to do it every day. So Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. sharp, we were there at the track.
It's also very mentally challenging.
It's a mental sport as much as it is physical. Yeah.
What was their mantra to you that you remember, or the essence of what you believe made them a great coach or a great teacher? Like maybe a quote or something, like how some teachers
Yeah,
have a special thing that you always remember about them.
Yeah, I remember Kobe, our coach. He was very personable. Like he would actually, engage in conversations with you, long conversations. He's famous for talking a lot. He would like engage in conversations with us and ask more than just about sport. He like knew about my family. He knew about my school. He knew about, he was very personable. And in addition to that, he was extremely pressure free. He would never, like, if I performed badly at a race, he would never be mad or even disappointed. It would always be like, that's a sport. You have highs, you have lows. Let's get back on Monday. Let's continue working. I never felt like I had pressure coming from him ever. And so
Which is interesting because it's the opposite of what we think of sports as being competitive.
Right.
Or mathematics as being competitive.
I never had the pressure from Kobe. He, it was in such a way that it was fun. You went to the track and we had fun. Yes, we're training. Yes, we're working hard. Sometimes you finish a workout and you just have to go, throw up. It happens, right? Because they're tough, but you're having fun. You never have that pressure. If a workout is going badly and he would see that you were struggling, sometimes he'd be like, stop. That's good for the day. Your body needs rest.
So as far as you were concerned, he saw you as a winner.
Yeah, exactly.
Always.
Never had the pressure of performing, which actually, perhaps ironically or not, led to me performing well enough to get a scholarship at least.
Exacto.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a very interesting take, right? Unlike what we look as success, to like push, and then maybe sometimes it's just allowing the experience to be the one that pushes you, right. Not necessarily because you're being forced to do it. So that was lovely. So what brought you to St. John's? Because you were already teaching.
I was teaching
at a high school.
At a high school, yeah. And I really liked it. I mean, I'm still really good friends with the faculty at Colegio San Ignacio. Always grateful for the opportunity they gave me. But what made me look elsewhere, start branching out, was my daughter. So I have a little daughter. She's in kindergarten here at St. John's. She's 5. She thinks she's 18, but she's 5. And basically I was at Colegio San Ignacio, and Colegio San Ignacio, for those who don't know, is an all-boys high school. And, I'm thinking I'm offering very high-level education, right? I think that I'm a good teacher, so I'm offering high-quality education. And teachers, we're not renowned for necessarily getting really big paychecks. And so
right.
I'm thinking I'm never going to be able to afford for my daughter the same education that I'm giving these students. Now, if she was a boy, I could have, because
right.
if you're, if you have a boy, you can enroll them in San Ignacio. You get some discounts as a teacher and whatnot. But she wasn't. So I knew that at some point I was going to have to look for ways that I could support her. I want to give her the best opportunities that I possibly can, as any parent wants to. And at that point, I started to, look elsewhere to see where I could go to provide her, those opportunities. And it was sort of a coincidence, maybe. During that process, I received a text from Natalie Doron.
Okay.
She used to be a teacher at Colegio San Ignacio as well.
They're looking for people.
She left the year before I left. She came here to St. John's. She texted me, the math department here has 2 positions open. One of them has to start in January. I think that's when...
That seems to follow you, right?
Yeah.
Starting
The other one's for August. I actually went for the August one because I did not want to leave my school halfway through the semester. Yes. I did not want to leave my students. I was teaching AP Calculus at that time. So I applied for the one in August, interviewed, I really enjoy the space. I enjoy this, like, really got a really good vibe when I came here for my interview. And that was it. I was like, okay, I'm in. I get to bring my daughter with me at school. And so that led me here, and I have no regrets.
And you said
at
now
all.
that your wife is also teaching here.
Yes,
So how is that connection?
So actually, my wife was a teacher assistant at the toddler program in Robinson.
Okay.
I came here to the school. I accepted the offer in around April, May, and the math department was going to go out to a professional development in New Hampshire that summer, and they asked me if I wanted to go. They're like, "Hey, you're going to join the department in August. You want to come with us?" And seems like a great opportunity. I went there. So I went there, and it was Ortiz, the principal, and almost the entire math department was there. It was a great way for me to get to know my department before the start of the school year. Really enjoy that conference. It was like we got some really good experiences from it that we can apply to our classrooms. And during that conference, Ortiz I don't remember if it was Ortiz or the conversation came up. They're looking for a teacher assistant at St. John's. And I told my wife, hey, send your resume. You're doing
Right. Like we say in Spanish, no pierdes nada.
Ajá, no pierdes nada, mándalo.
You don't
¿Qué va a
lose
pasar?
anything, right?
Right. The worst thing is that they don't call you, but they did call her, interview. They liked her. She joined as a teacher assistant here at the pre-K.
Which is wonderful because you both get to be with your daughter.
Correct. Yeah. And then they announced the opening of the toddler program as a Montessori-based program, and she had experience teaching Montessori. She was actually a Montessori teacher aide for about a year or so when we came back to Puerto Rico. So she applied for that. They liked how she was working, and now she's one of the teachers for the toddler program.
That's great how everything aligns, right?
Yeah.
Like your daughter, your wife that teaches Montessori, a toddler program that is including Montessori curriculum. So that's wonderful. Coming back to your passion in teaching, how would you describe your teaching style?
So I think I take a lot of what I learned from my coach and a lot of what I learned from my teacher role model, which is Herme, and I combine it into my classroom. My students will probably tell you that I'm too easy lured into tangents. When when we get a good conversation going about topics that I find interesting and they find interested and that are vaguely related to math, I will go down that rabbit hole. I have conversations with them that go beyond what we're doing in the classroom. I make sure to try and tell them a little bit of what applications are there for what we're doing. Because oftentimes I think mathematics, math teachers, we sin being too dry. And what we were talking before.
And it's interesting because my next question is, how do you make mathematics relevant, to the students and their everyday life?
Right. So when I go into the classroom and I try to teach mathematics, I sort of bring back a little bit of what I've learned from my two mentors, from track and field and from mathematics. So my mentors, like I said before, he would talk to you, my coach would talk to you and go on tangents and ask about your personal life. And, he wanted to know more about you than just your running abilities. And so I do a little bit of that in my classroom. If my students push me to it, I'll go down tangents and talk about different things and how those things apply to the real world. Earlier, I was talking about like what pure mathematics is, and it's just knowledge for the sake of knowledge, math for the sake of math. But I also realized, I'm aware that for most people, that's not interesting. Most people want to know why they're doing something. It's not just for the sake of math. Some students do enjoy that. Most don't. Most want to know, we get asked these really common questions like, when will I ever use this, right? That's probably number one question in any math
or anything
classroom.
or any topic.
And it's a little bit of an annoying question for math teachers because the correct answer is never, and we don't want to admit it, right? The correct answer, when will I ever use the quadratic formula? Never, right? The idea is that what you're learning in math class, and this informs a lot of my teaching style. What you're learning in a math class it's not the formulas, it's not the math, it's not the results, it's not the, the mechanics of how do you solve for an equation. The main goal of teaching mathematics is teaching the ability to construct new knowledge based on what you already know. So I know these rules, and I'm presented with a new equation that I've never seen before. How do I use the tools that I already have to attack this new problem? That is a skill that will transfer to the real world. When these kids finish school and they become the next doctor, the nurse, medicine research, and they're trying to find a cure for, I don't know, cancer or whatever unknown disease, they cannot type into Google what is the cure of cancer, right? I mean, they might find some, depending on how much you believe in conspiracy theories, you might find some answers to that. But what I'm trying to get at is they're gonna have to answer noble questions that nobody has the answer to. And they have to do that with the knowledge that they have. So how do you use the knowledge that I have, the patterns that I've already discovered? How do I use those to create predictions, to create new knowledge, to solve problems that I've never seen before? So one thing I often do is every one of my assessments will have at least one problem that they have never seen in class, they have never seen explained, but that they already have all the tools to construct a solution to that new problem.
What is generally their reaction?
They hate it.
When they first encounter that you throw that curveball
At first they hate it. I try to get them used to it, but at first it's not very welcome.
And then it kind of becomes something they look forward to.
Yeah. The thing is, like, once you're able to solve this kind of problem, it's very rewarding because you know that you did that yourself. Nobody told you do this, then do that, then do this, then do that. You thought about it. And sometimes I get a really messy solution because, of course, once you've seen it and have it explained, you can come up with a really clean solution. Oftentimes, that's not the first solution that you come up with, okay? And it's a very messy solution, but it's still the process. I care more about the process. Where did they go with this? And typically those problems, I don't grade them harshly. I want to see that they're trying something. That I tell them, throw spaghetti at the wall, see if something sticks.
Yeah.
And so I do that with all my physics classes. I do that with my math classes. So my teaching style, I think, has evolved into, first of all, how do I make sure that I foster that ability to solve new problems with the tools that I already have? And also, how do I make connections with the real world? I like to go on tangents, and I tell them, this that we're going to talk about right now has nothing to do with the exam, but I want to tell you, how do you apply this? Today, in my calculus class, I show them how images work. So how digital images work. They're just a matrix with numbers in it. Each number representing a scale from black to red, or from black to green, or from black to blue in the RGB scale. And then when I zoomed out, it was a picture of my daughter. But it was composed with numbers because that's how our computers store digital images. And to process images and to add filters and whatnot, behind the scene, what the computer is doing is just doing pure mathematics. Whoever programmed the computer made it so that you don't see those numbers. You can just click add the cat face filter when you're using Snapchat or whatever they use nowadays. But behind the scenes, it's all mathematics. It's all matrices and numbers. So I try to show them a little bit of that, and I tell them realistically, you're not going to be. You become a you go to production, or you become a photographer or whatever. You're not going to be doing the pure math, but it always helps to understand what's happening behind the computer for you to become better at what you do. Understanding what the machine is doing makes you better at what you do.
So what would you say is the way that mathematics is going to be taught in the future? How do you see math in the future?
I think math
in education.
I think slowly, very, very slowly, it's evolving into exactly that. It's more about problem solving rather than like learn this equation and now get an answer. It's becoming more and more about the process rather than the answer. And I think that's how it should be taught. It should be about developing this skill of like, how do I face new problems with previous information? Now, this is a skill that applies to all areas, I think. But I think mathematics is a very clean ground to work with that. Because when you get to actual real world, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of variables. You want to make a prediction. You have
interruptions.
yeah, you have to take into account, you want to predict the forecast. You have to take into account so many things: the temperature, the humidity, the pressure, the sea levels, everything. Everything, there's too many variables. And so it's not clean. It's not easy to create models in a full real world situation. But, you go to this clean universe of mathematics and you say, let's ignore friction. Let's ignore all these things. Let's simplify. Let's start with the simple. And I think that it's partly why I think what we're doing here at school, they will never directly apply it, because as soon as you take it to the real world, friction exists. There's drag. There's all these other factors that they have to take into account and that make what they learn completely inapplicable in and on itself. But the techniques, the strategy of like analyzing the problem and the data to be able to come up with a solution, that part, that's applicable still.
The other question I like to ask is, what drives you? What other things besides math drive you? Other interest or that ultimately do have an effect on who you are and how you teach?
So, first, the cliche answer, which is a little bit true. It's very true. I think it's a cliche answer, but it's true. I think it's very rewarding when you see students after the fact and they tell you things like, you influenced me, or like your class was really good, or, you made me believe in me, or, I think I'm not terrible at math thanks to you. Things like that really do make it seem worth, when you see students becoming professionals. And I think I'd like to think that I'm young enough that I'm not there yet, but that's not true. I've already met some students, especially the ones I taught in that semester that I was here. They've become teachers, they've become engineers, they're professionals now. And I'm like, I'm not even that old. How are you already finished college? But, 2014 was 10 years ago. So, of course, they're done with their master's degrees and their PhDs. So I think that part is very rewarding, in it for the kids and all that. As much as I have my reservations with that phrase, there is some truth to it. But in addition to that, I think I'm passionate about many other things. I'm very passionate about contributing to my community. I think I talked about this before, that to me, coming back to Puerto Rico was a non-negotiable. I had to be back here. I had to work here. I don't care how much more money I could make somewhere else with my degrees and whatnot. I have to be here. This is where I'm needed. And so that feeling that I am perhaps at least putting a grain of sand into the local community also drives me. And I have to say that also outside of school, outside of academics, sports is what completes me, in addition to obviously my family and whatnot. But as a personal hobby, what makes me unplug and clear my mind and drives me a lot is sports. I just love running, cycling as well, because my knees are starting to feel my age. So cycling is a little less aggressive than running. But yeah, I think sports also really allow me to sort of unplug. If I spend a whole week without exercising, my wife kicks me out of the house. Like, go ride your bike because you're insufferable. I get really angsty. Like, I have to move. I need to move. And I, part of that, being an educator, part of that is how can I use that to help kids?
Right.
I got to the school and we had our first ever meeting. My first ever meeting, faculty meeting, when we came back last year. They introduced new teachers. They talked a little bit about my trajectory. He was a NCAA athlete and whatever. And immediately walk out of that and I hear someone say, "Caballo, tenemos que hablar."
Right.
Guess who that is? Camacho came to me. And he's like,
gotta get a club going.
Yes, we're looking for, we want someone who can help us with cross country and track. And I was like, well, I want to say no, but I can't.
You can't.
I'm a new teacher. I don't know what's going on. I'm so lost. And you're asking me to, I want to say no, but then the next day I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So I've been coaching cross country and track here as well for last year. And then this year we're doing tryouts this week. And I enjoy it because it's another way in which I can impact the students that has nothing to do with mathematics.
Right.
I really enjoy helping kids, especially, when they come through the mini ranks, better themselves, challenge themselves and better themselves.
And what would you do if you were not a teacher?
I have never thought about that question. ever since I made that switch from thinking that I wanted to be a research mathematician to becoming an educator, I've never thought about what I would do if I wasn't an educator. I feel like a lot of my life is informed by being an educator, so much so that I don't even see myself doing any other thing. And when I do other things, they're always related to education. Like right now, I talked about that teacher of mine that motivated me. After he left my high school, he went to a company that works creating curriculum, math curriculum and curriculum in all classes, but he's in the math division. Creating curriculum to share with other schools, with smaller schools, with education departments and whatnot. And as soon as I landed in Puerto Rico, he called me. It's like, hey, we have some projects. You want to work with our company? And ever since I've been working on that's sort of my second job, my side gig. I work with them. I'm not teaching, but I'm developing the curriculum for other teachers to follow. And so even if I wasn't teaching,
You're still involved somehow.
I don't see myself detaching from education. I just enjoy it. I like to think that I'm at least decent at communicating mathematics, and we do need good math and science teachers.
Yeah. Where do you envision yourself 10 years from now?
10 years from now. Well, if everything goes well, I hope here. I don't see. You know, I'm at a point in my life where I not too long ago finally got stability, right? I was able to buy a house, get a stable job. My wife is here in the same school. My daughter's here at the same school. So it feels like I'm finally sort of able to breathe in, breathe out after spending 9 years in the U.S. feeling like I wasn't home. I wasn't complete. It's only been 3-4 years ago that I finally felt like I'm home. I'm settled. And so I haven't thought about if I want anything to change too much between now and 10 years. Ask me again in 5 years and maybe I'll have some ideas of things I want.
One thing I do
change.
like to do at the end of every interview is I give you a word and you give me a word back. So whatever comes into your mind. Youth.
Opportunity.
Research.
Advancement.
Running.
Passion.
Artificial intelligence.
The future.
Parenting.
Difficult.
Puerto Rico.
Home.
Future.
Youth.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So, paying tribute to our faculty, staff, and the cult of pedagogy, this is Pilar Alamo for Teachers in One Word and SJSPR.radio. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
Fernando